Hey there, it's Theta, aka the Monotone Messiah, aka your friendly neighborhood nihilist. If you've never watched one of my videos before, I'm a competitive Onward VR player who makes videos. Whether they're good or not is debatable, but I like to think they're at least educational since they tend to take a tutorial-like format. Anyway, this particular video is designed for you if you don't play Onward already or you're very new, but want to be able to watch a match without getting too lost. If you're a player and want to get your friends and family in on the action so that they'll watch a match or some tournament you're in, this is the video you should send them beforehand. The way I'm going to do this is I'm going to cover a recent match I was in between Animal House and my team Mayhem. It won't be the full match or anything because that would take a couple of hours, and I want this to be as compact of a video as possible. And instead, we'll go over the most important details for you, the new viewer of Onward. All right, let's get into it. If you're brand new to Onward or video games in general, it's worth asking what Onward is specifically. The answer to that at a superficial level at least is that it is a virtual reality first-person shooter. It's virtual reality because everybody is wearing a virtual reality headset, which is more or less wearing a small screen on your face. Gives you full immersion in a game environment, and then you're also holding controllers, and all of this is tracked by the VR system so that you can see what a person is doing in game with their actual body. If you see people crouching, then they are crouching in real life. If you see them throwing things, they are moving their arms as if they are throwing in real life. And when you see people holding their guns up or reloading them or something like that, they're doing that with their controllers. This is in stark contrast to regular video games where it's just a matter of pressing a button and waiting for an action to occur, like pressing R on your keyboard, for example, to reload your gun. This is a much different experience, and you'll see that just by looking at the highlights that are being played here. There's just much more physical expression going on with each player, and it's due to the fact that this is played in virtual reality rather than in a traditional console or computer. The other things to take note of are that as an esport, there are seasons, there are championships, so on and so forth. So you'll see in this opening screen, Season 10, Week 1, and there are organized teams. In this case, it's Animal House versus Mayhem. This is a match I was in. I am on Mayhem. And in this particular case, it's being played for the VRML, which is the VR Master League. That's an esports league that focuses on VR games. It's not just Onward, there's a few others as well. This is the primary league at the moment. There are other leagues and there are one-off tournaments that happen, but for the remainder of this video, we're just going to run off the assumption that you're watching a VRML game. If it's something else, the rules might be different, but in general, this should still translate to anything else you're watching. If this is your first time watching any kind of esport, it's worth explaining a few basic things. First of all, just like with traditional sports, there are commentators. We just call them casters because any game that gets streamed on a service like Twitch or YouTube or something like that, we call that a cast. So the people who are doing the cast are called casters, and they have full-blown setups at this point. You can see they're using green screens and they're using video feeds of themselves, which is pretty cool. And anyway, you'll see that there's some stuff on this screen that might not make sense if you've never played Onward specifically, or if you're not familiar with how esports in general works. First of all, there are bans. What's a ban? Well, to go to a more fundamental level, Onward, like any other game, has levels, or environments if you want to use more fundamental language. And each one of those has different characteristics. Some of them are open, some of them are more cover-ridden, some of them are large, some of them are small, so on and so forth. And each team, because it's made up of human beings, has strengths and weaknesses. And a big part of the strategy of Onward is figuring that out and saying, okay, we're not going to play this specific map for whatever reason. And there's two different ways to think about this. There's banning for strength, which is saying we don't want to play a map that the other team is really good at. And there's banning for weakness, which is saying we don't want to play a map that our team are not good at. As you can see here, Animal House banned a map called Downfall, and my team Mayhem banned Cargo. That just means that within this match, neither of these maps will get played. Under the score section, you'll see these TBDs. Each one of these represents a map that will get played. There's home and away, just like in traditional sports, and whoever is home gets 2 picks, and whoever is away gets 1. And each time you play a map, it's a race to 4 points. You can get 5 if you send the uplink, which you'll understand if you keep watching the video until I start talking about sending the uplink, or capping as they call it. But for now, just run off the assumption that it's a race to 4, which you can get just by killing the other team 4 times. And every time you get to 4, you win a map. And the way you win the entire match is to win at least 2 maps. So you get 4 on the first map, you get none on the second map, and then you get 4 on the third map, you win. And if you get 4 on the first, 4 on the second, you win. The game is, for all intents and purposes, over. Now, no matter what, you will play a third map, which I will get into at the end of the video, but that is the overall structure of scoring in Onward. It is a race to 4 across 3 maps. As you can see, the clock starts at 6 minutes. There's a 10-second sort of warm-up where everybody gets in, and you can do what's called a reset if something is wrong, so you can restart the round without having to go forward, like if somebody disconnects or something like that. But in general, the game is 6 minutes long per round. Each of these dots represents 1 person on the team, and as you can see, this is the very first round, so 0 points to 0. An important thing to understand is that the early stages of a game, or I should say the early stages of a round, most of the time between good teams is going to be a feeling out process. It's sort of like watching a boxing match or a chess match, where people just probe around trying to find weaknesses in the enemy, maybe make a couple of moves here and there, but it's not uncommon for the first couple minutes of an Onward round to be fairly uneventful. So you can see here this player, Nyx Dragon, he was shooting his gun, but he was just creating a diversion here. Now you might be asking yourself, what's with the colors, what's with the uniforms, what's with the map over here? Let's just go through each one. So these people with the, I don't know if you call it turquoise, blue, green, whatever, on their names, and you can see their arrows on this map right here as well. They're called MARSOC, after a real-world military unit. Their job is to reach this white dot, which is called the uplink, or the objective, or OBJ, as most players casually refer to it as. Their job is to get there and pull out a tablet that's attached to their back. You can't see it unless they pull it out, and then punch in a code. And if that happens, they will get 2 points on the board instead of 1. You get the 1 if you kill everybody, and you get 2 if you send the uplink as MARSOC. And the job of the other team, the so-called bad guys, who are called Volk in the game, are in the red, and their job is to kill the other team and prevent them from sending the uplink. Everything they do revolves around protecting this uplink and killing the other team. I'm just going to pause right here to focus in on a few things. You'll see here that there's this word downed. When somebody is downed, it means that they're not dead. In Onward, you can shoot somebody and they are immobilized, but they are still technically alive, and your friend can come and poke you with a syringe and revive you. In many cases, when you shoot somebody, they are immediately dead, even though you might have downed them initially. So if you look here, for example, the player Menorchid, who is on defense, he's on Volk, he downed Nyx Dragon, but he immediately killed him. This happens a lot because these players are all using automatic weapons, so the first couple of rounds might have downed Nyx, but because Menorchid was firing in full automatic, he ended up killing him in the same burst. And this happens quite a bit. I'll review that a little bit more later on. So you can see smokes are an important part of the game as well. This allows teams to move around an objective or just move in an open area without being seen. You'll see lots and lots of smokes in a game of Onward. It's very unusual to see a full game of Onward without at least a few smokes. You can see here they're making a push onto the OBJ. It's hard to see through the smoke. Okay, now we can see it. This right here is the uplink. This is what everybody's going for. So this person that I just killed, Shrieking Geek, that was me over here. I saw him through the fence and shot him. He was trying to get close to the uplink, and they had smoke on the uplink so that nobody would be able to see him approaching it. They didn't place the smoke quite correctly. I came around here and got an angle, but that is the whole point of throwing smokes around the uplink, in case you're curious. We're now into a 2v3 Lipinski. Alright, I've jumped ahead a little bit so you can see another important aspect of the game, which is grenades. You'll see them a lot, and if you don't know anything about them, you'll just see all these streaks on the screen and not be sure what's going on. This player defilade, he's behind this wall, he sees an enemy over here, he grabs a grenade off his chest, and that's what these streaking lines are. He just threw a grenade. They're not always fragmentation grenades like this, it's just any kind of projectile. And as you can see, this is what I was talking about before, about just being downed instead of dead. Shrieking Geek can technically still communicate with his teammates, which can be a real problem if you down somebody and you can't finish them off for whatever reason, because that person still has access to a radio and he can tell his teammates, hey, this person is in this location, go and kill them. It's also a problem because if a teammate of theirs comes around the corner and revives him, they now have another person up. And the way you can tell if anybody has been downed, if you can't see them on the screen necessarily, is you can see there's this little cross icon on the player's name when, or excuse me, not on the name, but on the dot here. And once they die completely, they turn into an X. But when you just see this cross, it means that they're only downed and they can still be revived. Another thing to understand about Onward is that you can die within one shot. Therefore, stealth ends up being pretty important. As you can see, Shrieking is doing what I call spider crabbing, which just, I call it that because of the animation on the legs, which I just find hilarious. It just doesn't make any physical sense. But he's doing something smart. He's staying low, and again, this is VR, so he is kneeling in real life. He's not pressing a button to kneel. And he's doing that so that he can remain quiet. If you stand fully upright and move, you're much easier to pick out because in Onward, you make sounds when you move. In fact, even if you're crouched, if you move too fast, you can make sounds. It's like carabiners on a vest or something that you can hear. It's just like clanging sounds that they added in the game specifically to encourage you to move a little more intelligently. The other thing I wanted to show in this clip, you can see a down right there. So Menorkid is not dead, he has just been downed. One thing you'll notice though is that these guns have lasers coming out of them. You might be wondering to yourself, what's with the lasers? Why can't people just use those to figure out where people are? If you haven't figured it out already, nobody is seeing the lasers except for the people who are casting the game. That is a setting for anybody who is casting. You can press a button and you'll see lasers coming out of the guns. And it's just so viewers like you can see where people are aiming. I've jumped ahead a little bit just to highlight a few things. First of all, you can see Nolamite just pulled out his tablet. That's what I was talking about before. The other thing I want to highlight is as the time is winding down, the tone tends to get a little more desperate, particularly for Marsoc, because if they don't kill the other team or cap, then defense wins by default. The defense wants the time to run out. So you can see here James runs in and he pulls out his tablet, and this is what I mean by sending the uplink, or capping as everybody calls it. He's right on the objective. You can't see it that well. There's a zone around every objective. It's like a radius where you can cap from, and in this particular map you can cap from inside a building. This happens on several maps. James pulled out his tablet, punched the code in, and I don't know if you saw before, but the score was 1-2, and because he sent the uplink, the score went to 1-4, and as a result we won the map. because the race is to go to 4. And I said before at the very beginning you can get up to 5. That's the case if you have, let's say this was 1 to 3, and then James the cap there, it still gives you 2 points. So it would have been 1 to 5. But because we only had 2 points at that point, the 2 points from capping turned it into a 4 to 1 instead of a 5 to 1. One thing that might confuse you a bit if you've never played Onward or if you're not really into video games is the idea of spawns. This is an important thing to understand, especially on larger maps, to really get what players are doing in the early game. Every map has different spawn points, and on some of the maps, including this one that I've skipped ahead to, it's randomized. So you have probabilities of going to different spawn points, like you might spawn here, you might spawn here, you might spawn here, but before you come in, neither side knows where Marsoc is going to spawn. And that's an important point to highlight too. Marsoc is the only one where there's uncertainty. Everybody knows where defense is going to be spawning. Everybody knows where Volk is going to be spawning. They will always be spawning on the objective. And so what you'll see a lot of the time in the early game is probing that I mentioned before, where the defense is kind of vigilantly watching different angles, trying to see where Marsoc spawned, and Marsoc is looking around trying to figure out where the defense is setting itself up. This is an important element of randomness in the game, as is the fact that the objectives move. You might notice this as you're watching a game, and it might be a little confusing, but just like with the spawn points, nobody knows ahead of time which objectives you're going to be playing in a given map. You know once you start the game and you have what's called the board. There's like a little intermediary area where all the players hang out before the match starts. You can look on a map and say, okay, we know we have this particular objective, but you don't know before the game starts what objectives you're going to be dealing with. And the objective changes every 2 rounds. So in this case, there's 2 rounds on the board here, and I know because I was playing that both of those rounds were just kill rounds. This was not a cap. So this is a new objective. We played 2 rounds at a different objective, and before those 2 rounds were over, we did not know what the next objective was going to be. So there's this big adjustment that has to be made every time the objective shifts, and you have to figure out, okay, what's the strategy going to be for this particular objective? And then on top of that, each team has to strategize around where are we spawning, and if we spawn here, do we go this way? If we spawn here, do we go that way? So on and so forth. So if you're watching a match and you're not really sure why there's so much caution, that is usually why. It's the defense sitting and waiting to see if they can figure out where the spawns were, and the offense trying to kind of probe without giving away their spawn position, because the defense does not know where they spawned. And that can change. The attack angles are going to change where you set up your defense. And finally, I've jumped ahead to the very end of the match just so kind of reaffirm how the scoring works. You can see here that the teams are divided on sides. So Mayhem, which is my team, we won. It's 4-4-3, and Animal House 1-0-4. So if you're a little confused, it just means that they won the last map. But as I said at the beginning, if you win 2 out of 3, the game is yours. The reason that all 3 maps get played, even if the first 2 are a win, is because of something called MMR, which is matchmaking rank, and that is how teams in the league are sorted. That's how you can determine who's number 1 from number 2, number 3, and all that is based on the MMR that they accumulate throughout the season. And the MMR is calculated in different games and different leagues in different ways. For the VRML and Onward, the MMR is calculated based on the total score, and you get less MMR if you don't win all 3 maps. If you lose, it's possible, believe it or not, just because the way the scoring system works, to have a tie score while still having a winner. You can have the points to win 2 maps and then lose terribly on another one, and you can end up with a tie score, something like that. and you still win. But the reason that these last maps is this is, you know, the first two being dropped is not uncommon. But if you're on the losing team, it's very important that you win the last map at the very least, because the MMR loss that you get out of it is as low as possible. If you're not familiar with things like the ELO rating system, which is similar, MMR is zero sum, so you're taking it from the other team when you win, and you're losing it when you lose. We are taking MMR from Animal House in that sense, and the less that they lose, the less MMR they lose, which is why they fought hard on this last map and won. So if you see a match like this where, you know, the first two maps are wins, and you're wondering, okay, why do they keep playing? That's why. It's competitive reasons, it's for scoring, it's for ranking. Another interesting feature of Onward is what's called a trade. You'll see this happen right there. It's when two players exchange fire and kill each other at the exact same time. And what's funny is that sometimes that happens and both players are downed instead of killed. So you can have a situation where both teams have somebody that's immobilized but is capable of calling out to the other side. That's all I've got for now. I made this purposefully short because I did not want to belabor all the details. There are lots of other videos about the specifics of Onward, including in my channel. If you're curious about strategy, tactics, how to join the league, anything like that, I have videos about all sorts of subjects related to Onward. So check out my videos. There's also plenty of other channels. Just go into YouTube and type Onward. You will see there are tons of them. But my goal here was not to explore every nook and cranny about the game. Just wanted to create something for brand new spectators so that they could watch and feel at least a little bit informed. Hopefully that accomplished its goal. If there are any questions, don't hesitate to leave them in the comments section. You can also send me a message on Twitter. You can see top left of the screen here, Theta VR on Twitter. And that's all I've got for now. So this is Theta, signing out.